science and mysteries and mystical things and magic. I am Russ, and this is my brother Kyle, and
what's up?
We are doing our fourth show, which I'm not supposed to say.
That's fine, you can say that.
All right.
We are doing our fourth show.
It is the fourth show.
You know, it may not be for you.
That's right. All right.
Snake Bros.
Snake Bros. Getting right into it. The first topic today is something that happened a little while ago, globally, I think. Maybe not to China, but anyway, it was very recent, and it screws everybody up that it happens to, and this is why we want to talk about it, and it is daylight savings time.
Ugh.
Take it away, Kyle.
Hate it. Don't like it. And I only recently discovered this in the past few years when I started paying attention to astronomy. I was trying to learn and memorize the positions of the stars or the constellations at night and what time it was at night based on what month of the year it was. And I was getting pretty good at kind of large, you know, what am I saying? Not large, but long time things like...
You mean broad understandings?
Okay. I was getting pretty good at a few things. Like I noticed, like I was paying attention to Orion. When I first started doing it, I was watching Orion, and I was just looking at the position. And most of the time, when I was outside on my porch in the evening after work, looking at Orion, it was around 10 o'clock. Or I would always note the time when I saw it and recognize, like, okay, it's kind of tilted, you know, at this much of an angle. And I started imagining when I looked at them, an old style clock with the hands, okay? So if the tilt was at 2 o'clock, or the tilt was at 3 o'clock, so it's like horizontal, or if it was vertical, it would be at 12 o'clock,
yeah.
Or if it was upside down, which didn't ever happen, it would be at 6.
If it was upside down, it was below the horizon.
Right. Yeah, well, it does happen, I just can't see it. Anyway, I started memorizing you know, the position of Orion, say in the wintertime, like in the middle of winter, or the position of Orion in the summertime, in the middle of the summer, somewhere around there. Then I started looking at different constellations of the zodiac and trying to start paying attention to the whole ring, you know, the whole zodiacal circle in the sky.
Right. Which Orion's not part of, but...
Right.
Yeah.
So Leo, you know, I noticed like around 10 o'clock in the evening in the winter, was pointing straight up, okay, and in the eastern sky, and then, you know, midnight, 1 o'clock, he'd be almost horizontal.
On his back or on his?
No, on his feet.
Okay.
Right. So anyway, I was paying attention to things like that, and then also trying to start paying attention to the moon rising in its cycles, and then where the sun set and rose.
Gotta know what the moon's doing.
However, I can't see the horizon at sunrise, like in the east, because of trees, but I can see it in the west. So it was easier to pay attention to where the sun is setting, different times of year. And I was trying to use this memory or memorization to know mainly what time it was at night without looking at the clock, where I could just look up at the sky and be like, oh yeah, it's this time of year, you know, I see Orion over there, or I see Leo, it's, you know, it's 12 o'clock, or it's 2 o'clock in the morning, or whatever.
Right.
And I quickly learned that daylight savings screws that up, and it seems simple that it's, oh, well, it's only by an hour, you know, but you have to memorize again, like when daylight savings changes, in which direction, and then when it changes again. And it just occurred to me that, like, there's something sinister about daylight savings time, because it doesn't do anything.
Right.
It does nothing. It does not change the spin of the earth. It does not change the rotation around the sun. It doesn't change anything other than our perception of what time it is.
Right.
And we're talking that. So if you're getting up at 7 in the morning every day, and then daylight savings happens, suddenly you're getting up at 6. And it's still dark.
Right. You just call it 7, but
Right.
you're actually getting up at 6. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that the main thing is that the days get longer in the summer and the days get shorter in the winter, right? And I think that daylight savings time screws up our what would otherwise be our natural sort of memorization of the time of year based on the lengths of the days and the sort of the obviously the feel of the climate, but also where the sun is, how far tilted it is, you know, or its motion is in the sky, where we would be able to, after, like, I'm 35, so after 35 years of experiencing this and clocking time the way it's, you know, the same all the time, I would by now have, I wouldn't need a watch, okay, at night or in the daytime. But
right,
that,
so it disconnects us from the cosmos.
yes.
Yeah.
So you had pointed out, Russ, that in a complex system that takes that is motions or say whatever is over long periods of time, every little detail counts, and this is one tiny little detail, just 1 hour shift here, 1 hour shift over there, but it's enough to just screw up the entire information
right.
coming to you. So your brain can no longer. It's not easy for someone to get used to that.
Right,
and be able to decode it.
it's already an abstract concept to look up at a bunch of points in the sky and understand what time of year it is and what time it is. Then the concept of taking that abstract idea and doing math on it automatically and knowing which way to do the math, you know, whether I'm subtracting or adding, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I look up at the night sky and I have, you know, I've learned to recognize some constellations, and we do live out of the city, so we don't have as much light pollution where we are, but so we can see the stars. But still, I look up and I see Orion there, and I see the Big Dipper over there, and I don't know why they're there. In other words, seeing them there does not tell me anything about where on the planet I am, what time it is, what time of year it is, and it should.
Right.
Because again, we've been alive for many, many years, looking at the stars, looking at space, and if it was always the same, you would begin to recognize it.
Right, and the main thing that we go by is the time, right?
Yeah.
In modern times, we're always looking at our clocks, we're always looking at our watches or the phone to see what time it is. So even though that's the way we do it now, as opposed to maybe in ancient times they didn't use that, they looked at the sky for that information. How can you have something called daylight savings time when that was going on?
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
So the other thing that confuses me about it, jumping topics here briefly, is the
We
phrases.
should learn not to say briefly because sometimes it's not.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump topics, which is a very brief occurrence. I'm not saying how long I'll stay on this.
Ah, okay, I see. The jump is brief.
That's right.
All right.
So the phrases associated with daylight savings time are even more confusing. They just piss me off. Like, oh, you know, we gained an hour.
Right.
What are we talking about? At night or in the morning? No. There is no gaining or losing an hour.
Right.
We have there's freaking 24 hours in the day cycle, or
Right.
the day-night cycle. You don't gain or lose any by shifting which number you're using at the time. It's
Right. But
And still-
I do use the spring forward, fall back to help me remember which
okay.
is what.
So my problem with that is like when I'm going forward, is it the number I'm talking about, or the actual day time?
No, yeah, you move the clock forward
the
one
number.
plus one.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the fall
Plus
back
one
is like
minus.
minus one. Yeah. That's how I remember it.
Spring forward one number.
That's right. Spring the hands on the clock forward, or spring the hands on the clock back.
Okay, well, that's a good one. Gain an hour and lose an hour is terrible.
Right, because it's subjective and dumb.
Yeah, and that has to do with like, is it morning or night?
Yeah.
I
Right.
think. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and by the way, you do it at 2 a.m. because bars. That's
So okay, yeah. So let's talk about the economics of this. Like,
yeah.
Why? What I've always heard is that it's for the farmers. Well, I'm a farmer now.
Right.
I don't need that shit.
Farmers hate it, actually. They hate it. But yes, I had always heard that it was for the farmers to make all the other businesses sort of, because farmers have to get up with the sun, you know, because farms. And so it makes all the other businesses shift
Their hours of operation.
their hours of operation to sort of,
right before daylight.
right. And,
Yeah.
farmers hate it. They completely don't like it. Because, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. I mean, maybe it would work if you were slowly doing this incremental shift to actually follow the sun, but instead what happens is the next day after daylight savings times, it's either dark when it was light or light when it was dark. It doesn't act. Yeah.
Ugh, I hate it. So another thing, I've been trying to study my sleep cycle for a long time, and I don't.
You have a sleep cycle?
I don't quite. Yeah, that's the problem, right? It's random. I don't quite understand it, but I had a kid over a year ago, and he has a sleep cycle.
Yeah, he is not yet corrupted.
Right. So it became very apparent that when the time changed, that wasn't going to work. So now we have actually, my family has shifted our sleep cycle. No, we haven't. We haven't changed anything.
Right. You've just, yeah. That's right.
And we have, thank God, we have the ability to, or I have the ability to make my own hours.
Right. Where previously you were getting up at where the clock said 7.
Right.
Now you're doing it at 8, but it's really the same time.
It's the same time.
You haven't changed anything. You just you're just shifting what you're doing on the clock.
But for a little while, we were trying to get up at 7 still after the clock changed.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, this is. It was
the kid. Yeah, he wasn't handling it.
It was not working. So now we're back to where we were before daylight savings time happened, and it's great. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out there.
Okay, but I think there's more here because, like you said, the economic stuff. So there have been studies. I can't quote them, but I've read studies on this about the sort of jet lag that happens. There's a minimal amount of jet lag because it's the same phenomenon where when you get on a jet and you fly somewhere and the clock actually changes for you because you've moved positions drastically on the planet. So where you land. It's 3 hours ahead or behind, whatever you were, or whatever. That's what causes jet lag, because suddenly your schedule is off for the schedule that everybody there is using.
Forced jet lag.
Right, but think about this. Think about the debilitation that jet lag causes. Some people, it requires a day for them to recover from it. But that was 200, 300 people on a plane. This is the whole nation. And, just speaking of the United States, I don't know. I don't know the other I know some places in Europe do it. I don't know if Canada does it. I think they do. I don't know if Mexico does it. But it doesn't matter. Just speaking specifically of the United States, 350 million people are given 1 hour of jet lag twice a year. Ugh. Think of the economic problems with that. I remember reading one study that talked about there's a 2-week buffer where the daylight savings time is right in the middle of that. So 1 week, you get this buffer or whatever where there's this economic slowdown because everyone is trying to adjust to this minor jet lag and everybody's a little bit off kilter, and so things don't happen as quickly and stuff gets out of time, so it's actually massively debilitating. You could say that we lose billions of dollars a year due to daylight savings time because of slowed down activity in the economy. Yeah. That's just that's crazy, especially and then why does it keep getting passed in Congress? You look at it they have to keep ratifying it, whatever, keep passing it again, but no one wants it. No one wants it.
Yeah, why do they do that?
Right, I don't understand how it keeps getting passed.
They keep telling it's kind of like a lot of other things the government does, where they're like, "We're helping you." No, you're not. The IRS, Internal Revenue Service? No, it's not a service.
Yeah.
Anyway, no politics around here.
Service, in the sense that they can take all your stuff and say, "Come get it back." Yeah. Guilty until proven innocent, thanks to the IRS. All right, so yeah, politics, we're not going to get into that, but there is something very strange about that. And not connected to the massive global elite trying to take over everything.
So I'm gonna make a way out there connection to this deal.
Way out.
I was reading the Greater and Lesser Keys, or the Greater Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon. Yeah, I got them on PDF. But they basically talk about magic.
Wait, you don't read them on Ancient Vellum? Nope. Then it's not.
Yeah. So they talk about magic. In the Lesser Key, it's mostly about these various different beings, demons.
Right.
And how to conjure them and all this kind of stuff.
72 demons of Solomon.
That's right. In the Greater Key, there's a whole bunch of different, basically spells or magical things, enchantments.
A lot of magic circles and
Right. A lot of them are strange. I don't want to get into that. What I noticed about it was that one of the first things in the book is it talks about the hours. right? The hours are each hour of the day represents something. Each day represents something.
Yeah.
Each cycle of the moon represents something, and you have to learn all of these things, all these the positions of the planets. It's very like astrological. Okay. In order to achieve certain spells, or every one of them, you have like they have more and more power depending on what hour of the day you do it, and a lot of the spells will require like you must do it on this hour, you must do it on this month, you must do it on this lunar cycle, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that's legit. It actually to me looked like a lot having to do with precession, but they didn't actually know of all the planets at the time that this was translated or written or whatever. So there was a lot of problems with it. My point is, in looking into magic, all of that has to do with where you are on the planet, what time it is, the positions of things in the sky, and all of that has great importance. So one conspiracy theory is daylight savings is to confuse us so we can't do magic, man.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But it had that effect on me without the magic. I was just trying to know where I was and when by looking at the sky.
Yeah.
And it messes that up. So it's like,
Yeah, I can give a great example of that. I have a telescope that has an automatic tracking system. Okay, so basically there's a little handset, and the telescope is powered. You have to plug it into the wall, and it's got little servo motors, and it's mounting. And so you can take the handset and you can tell the handset, okay, I want to look at Jupiter, right? And you tell it what time of year it is and what your location on the planet is. So usually I'll have that pre-programmed. It knows my GPS, my latitude and longitude coordinates, roughly, and it's and the date, right? But it also asks you daylight savings
on or
off. And I don't know which one is on or off. And Jupiter, so Jupiter's up in the sky, and I'm like, let's look at Jupiter, and I've got daylight savings in the wrong position, but it knows everything else. It knows exactly where I am, it knows exactly what day it is and what hour, but it doesn't know the hour. And so it's like, all right, you want to look at Jupiter? And it goes, and like points up at the sky, and I look through there, and there's nothing.
Exactly.
Jupiter's not there.
That's a perfect example of the problem.
Right, and so then I go, well, okay, daylight savings on when it was off or whatever, and then I tell it, okay, now look at Jupiter, and it goes, and moves over, and then there's Jupiter. I'm like, okay, and it's a pretty big shift. An hour, you'd be surprised how much, this stuff moves in the sky in an hour. It's quite a bit.
So, for example, if some nerd at NASA, just forgot.
There's no
nerds they were about to do a flight, and he forgot about daylight savings time.
Oh, man.
They would not get to the moon.
Right.
They would have to turn around and come back.
Careful.
And that would fail because they would be in the wrong place.
So this is like So what? Okay, let me ask you this. I don't know if you know this, but what about 24-hour clock? Does it matter?
What do you mean?
No, it doesn't matter. If you have if you're using 24-hour system, you still have to switch it. So.
That's right. You still have
that's
to,
dumb.
You
That
just,
was a dumb
You're just
question.
changing your pointer, right? Changing the pointer. Yeah. It's you're at 0800.
I'm gonna edit that question out.
No, you can't. Can't do it.
What? Okay, well then I'm gonna edit that comment out that I just made about editing that question out.
Can't do that either.
Damn it!
Whatever. You know what you want.
No, it's cool. I'm totally fine with all of our listeners knowing that I'm dumb. It doesn't bother me in the least.
Yeah. Basically, everybody out there listening to us should know that we're dumb because we are.
Yeah. So daylight savings time is a conspiracy by the government to stop us from being able to do magic.
Done.
Anyway, topic over.
Topic over. Answered.
And you know who probably came up with it was the Longheads.
That's right. Oh yeah, the Longheads.
Yeah, because they have a long view.
Yeah, they do.
And they live for long periods of time.
I see what you did there.
And they know, yeah. They freaking know.
So let's talk about what are the Longheads. You guys have heard us briefly mention the Nephas. The Longheads are something else, I think. But basically, all over the world, but primarily as far as I know right now, in Russia, Peru, and on the island of Malta, have been found skeletons that are otherwise, as far as I know, normal human skeletons, but their skulls are not normal human skulls. And
some of them have like increased volume of like 25%.
yeah, it's a lot. So they have what's called an elongated cranium. So if you've ever seen the old cone heads, you know, we are from France, like those guys. They would look like that, except their heads aren't as pointy. And you can, if you go online and you look up the Paracas skulls, Paracas is P-A-R-A-C-A-S. You look up Paracas skulls, and you will see the elongation is not something you can explain by. One of the ways they try to explain it is head binding. So there are, and this is also interesting in other ways. There are certain tribes, some of them no longer extant, but others that do still exist, that had a practice of what was called head binding, where they basically, when they had a baby, they would strap boards to its head, to his head, you know, his or her head, on the sides and on the back and the front, and then like use ropes and wrap the ropes around and around, and keep tightening that down over time. They would do it, you know, in increments, and keep cinching it down and cinching it down. And that would basically, because the baby's skull plates are not yet fused together.
Right.
They could sort of squeeze his skull into this weird looking point. You know, it would elongate it basically. The back of his cranium would just kind of make it stick upwards in this point. And if you look at any head-bound skull, you can tell that it was a human skull that has been massively misshapen.
But also, there's a point about that tradition. No matter how long they do it or how long they make the skull through that process, its volume does not change.
Right. So mutilating the skull in that fashion, you can change the shape of it all you want, but you will never change the actual internal volume of the skull. And I think the internal volume of a human skull, the average is between 18 and 2,000 cubic centimeters. Okay? Yeah. Or I'm sorry, 1,800 to 2,000, right?
Yeah.
Cubic centimeters. Some of these, like the Paracas, there's some of the Paracas skulls have 2,500 to 3,000 cubic centimeters interior volume. Wow. So that is not a product of headbind. It can't be. And when you look at headbound skulls, you see that where the cranium has been stretched upwards, it noticeably gets very much smaller.
Right, it tapers down.
Whereas the Paracas skulls, like, no, it stays the same width, and it goes up. You know, it's unimaginable. It's just very strange. And this is the other thing. They don't have a parietal plate on the true elongated skulls. There's a bunch of very subtle differences that I'm not.
Wait a minute. What is the parietal plate? I don't know what that is.
The humans have like 3 skull plates. Okay. There's you got a suture that goes in the middle and it kind of splits. And now I'm saying this from memory, and I probably should look it up. But basically,
our new official show observer will correct us if we are wrong.
Right.
He is the Green Bret of England.
Right. That's right, the Green Bret of England. But the problem is that this is a delayed thing right now. He's not live with us yet, so he can't correct me on this right now.
That's all right. Anyway, continue.
But yeah, so they're missing this plate, and I could be wrong on this, but basically the parietal plate I think is in the back. Okay, so humans have this. There's a suture going down the middle of the skull on the top, and then it sort of splits in a V, and that's the parietal plate's there in the back. They don't have that. Okay, and if that picture is wrong, it still is correct that they do not have the parietal plate. They only have 2 instead of 3 like humans do.
Okay.
And there, you can go online and go to YouTube, and there are some videos of medical doctors who are going into. There's a museum down in Peru that is run by a guy who's very interested in this, like a native Peruvian, and he has Paracas skulls in his museum, and medical doctors have gone there. And you can watch videos of them looking at the skull, and they're pointing out all the stuff that's completely different from humans. You're like, well, this is the zygomatic arch, which is the cheekbone thing. And you're like, yeah, this is not the same. And like the thickness of this part, and where the spine comes in, like where the spine comes into the cortex is in a totally different place. And like, so they point out all this different stuff, and it's very interesting. So the point is that.
Yes.
300 of those skeletons, fully intact. 300 fully intact skeletons who had elongated skulls, that could not have been the product of any kind of mutilation, was not the product of any kind of sickness. That's the other thing the doctors will say. Like if you've got any of the cephaly diseases, right? the bone, and you can also look those up, and you can see the skulls of people that had that. The bone looks puffy, like spongy, and it's also non-symmetrical, right? And it'll be lumpy and everything like that. In other words, it looks like a diseased bone or a product of some kind of mutation, whereas these Paracas elongated skulls do not have any of that. They're very smooth, they're totally symmetrical, right? They look like a normal skull except that they're stretched.
Yeah.
The bone is not sick. Okay, so it isn't a product of any of those diseases either, and so there's 300 of those skeletons found in Paracas. There were 7,000 elongated skull skeletons found in the Hypogeum in Malta. And the Hypogeum is an amazing underground structure that is completely, it is not understood at all. It has resonance chambers that are just totally unexplainable. There's one chamber in there they call it the egg chamber or oracle chamber, and it's down on like the third level down. Okay, so the Hypogeum has many levels, and it's dug directly into the rock, and it's got all these round temple-looking rooms or whatever. But if you go down to the third level, and you can find this little niche, and there's a little portal, like a little hole, and you go in there, and it's an egg-shaped room, and you sit in there, and you can speak normally, and everyone in the Hypogeum can hear you speaking clearly.
Oh,
that
man.
Is just like, that is...
I've got to go there.
I know.
I've got to go there.
So when they first found this on Malta, the island of Malta, it's in the Mediterranean, they were building a subdivision.
Turn it into a recording studio. The Hypogeum, where you come to kick ass. Plus more.
Yeah. Coming to you straight from the egg room in the Hypogeum on Malta.
Yeah,
the microphone is near the entrance, and I'm down in the egg room, 3 floors down.
Awesome.
Put a ribbon on it.
Ribbon.
So when they first found this, they were building a subdivision, and on Malta each house has a cistern. So Malta's a lot of sedimentary rock, so they would just dig a sort of cistern into the rock below the house, and that would be where the water was kept. Okay, and it was it could keep it cool and everything. So they're digging cisterns for the houses they're building, and bam, they break into the top level of the Hypogeum. And when they broke into it, it was every room on every floor was like 3/4 full of dirt. Basically, it was dirt and rock and gravel and everything, and it was completely homogenized. In other words, it had been all mixed up so that everything was even, and there were no stratification, there were no layers.
Right.
So it had all been laid down, bam, at once, and mixed in with that dirt and gravel were the bones of 7,000 people with elongated skulls. So the conventional archaeological explanation of that is that a tidal wave or something rolled through a Neolithic graveyard and picked up all those skeletons and then deposited them through the door of the Hypogeum, which is a little... And it's just like, that is ridiculous. No, what happened was these people were into the Hypogeum to escape some kind of cataclysmic event, and they were drowned and they were inundated. They were,
Yeah.
The tidal wave came in carrying dirt and everything like that, and it poured into the place and just and killed them. It's a terrible story.
But they
all
had
those
long skulls.
That's right. They had elongated skulls, and there were 7,000 of them, and now all that's left are 12 of the skulls in the museum at Malta, and they don't even show them. They're not on display. So out of 7,000 complete skeletons, there are now 12 skulls left, and you have to get special permission from the proprietor of the museum to see that. I think I'm not totally positive about that, but I'm pretty sure they're not on display there, and you have to ask to see them. And and there may be even less now because they've just been disappearing over the years. Like so 7,000 in Malta, 300 in Peru, and there's been a lot found in Russia. I don't know the numbers on that.
Plus, there's this strange tradition that is
Right.
pretty much global in scope on all these different continents everywhere of
head
this
binding.
head binding thing to make your skull long. Why
Right.
would people be doing that?
Right, and it was the elites of various tribes they were the only ones allowed to do the head binding, and they did it because it gave them stature. Like if you had
Right.
a long head, you were considered like above human. You were a ruler. You were godlike.
Right.
So what?
Where did they get that?
Right. How does this practice spread around the world to cultures that supposedly haven't had any contact with each other. And
Right.
in modern times, we know that the cultures that we find haven't had any contact with each other. So the question then becomes, why?
Okay, let's take a break.
Right.
It's been 30 minutes. Just keep that question in your head.
Why?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah, it is.
Why?
I'm doing it to you again, man.
No, this is perfect. Everybody that is ever listening to Snake Bros should always have this question in their head. Why?
Snake Bros. All right, but yeah, we're we've reached the end of the first segment. Please stick around for the next segment because Russ will continue talking about that question.
That's right. I might even give you the rest of it.
All right.
Snake Bros.
Welcome back to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, where the purpose is pontification on palatable and unpalatable subjects of slithering snakeness. Snake Bros.
Slithering snakeness. Snakes.
We hail here from our lofty, dry, ancient seabed in the Edwards Plateau of Texas. And,
It's good being on a plateau.
yeah. Thinking of various different ways to analyze the universe from our 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science,
Greetings.
which is also green and not in the energy saving way.
Much science is done in the green cube.
It is green like snakes. So we're continuing on with this discussion of longheads.
The long heads. So I was asking, why is this not a recognized species of hominid? We have 7,000 in the hypogeum, complete skeletons. We have 300 at least complete skeletons in Malta. In Peru. Many hundreds, as far as I know, in Russia, and there's been some found in Brazil. Probably many more around the world. Anyway, we have thousands and thousands of them, full skeletons. Whereas you look at Australopithecus, Sahelanthropus, Homo erectus, any of the sort of human ancestor hominid species, some of them are these are recognized named species, and that's based on teeth and skull fragments. And
Yeah,
some-
but those prove evolution. So
human evolution. The question is like, how come the various ape and monkey species don't have evolution? Maybe because they're being stolen.
you're not
So
supposed
they
to
can-
ask those questions, Russ.
Yeah.
Stop asking that question.
Yeah, and
now, Russ.
stop asking that question, Russ. I was listening to one of the previous podcasts, and I noticed some of the stuff we were saying about evolution. I want to say that I don't disbelieve in the concept of evolution. I just have questions about it and about the assumptions that are made. It does appear to me that some kind of evolutionary process is taking place, but I don't see a linear progression like it's depicted.
Yeah.
The classic graphic, where you start out with the hunched over, Homo erectus, and then it gets straighter and straighter and straighter up and straighter until it's an android or whatever.
I think
I just think that's
my
crap.
opinion on evolution is that it still should be a question.
Yes, absolutely.
It should be treated as a question.
Right. And that we talked about the fossil record, and this is part of that. Like, we don't have a record. So drawing linear lines between 5 distant points in time is not really it's not really scientific.
Right, but so the point is that those few skull fragments and teeth are used to
define
the evolutionary process of humans and all of this stuff, and there's all of this weight put on them as far as
right
supporting
and some of the,
scientific theories.
Neanderthals, as I know, a lot of skeletons of Neanderthals have been found. I don't know how many, but I know that they're not just fragments of stuff. They found complete skeletons, and some of the other ones are too. But there are a lot of names. If you go look at the there
wasn't 300 of them found in one spot.
That's right, or 7,000. Right, and so why isn't this an accepted species? Well, I think that part of the reason for that may be that there's an issue with cohabitation, and that's it's
right, because with some of these that they use to support the theory of evolution they're fossilized.
Well, and they're supposed to be ancestors, right?
Yeah.
And so
I'm just saying they're way older than these elongated skulls,
Right. So the elongated skulls would definitely have cohabited the world with Homo sapiens sapiens, us, right? So if you have, and we call in the alternative, whatever you would call it, the alternative community, we call them. I think we call it's like Homo paracas elongatus is what we call them, basically.
Homo sapiens snakes.
Homo snakes. That's right. That's us. We are an evolved version of Homo sape. We are Homo snake. So, yeah. So I wonder, so why wouldn't they acknowledge this as a species? And it probably is partially because of cohabitation, because there's something about the way evolutionists, like neo-Darwinists or Darwinists, look at the evolutionary tree. And by the way, they rest a great deal of their. It seems to me, I can't say this for certain, but it seems to me that a great deal of the support for the entire concept of evolution from the primordial sludge all the way up to modern times is based in this progression of man from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens sapiens, right? In one species for a very short period of time, from 2 million years ago to now. So they've paid very close attention to this progression, and they've tried to flesh it all the way out so there aren't any quote unquote missing links, and they could say, see, we went from this almost monkey gorilla thing to now.
So are you saying they're navel gazing? We as a species
you might have been a monkey.
Are navel gazing.
Well, I'm just saying that it is the human evolution that they use to sort of stand for the evolution of everything.
Yeah.
Which has all kinds of problems with it, because Homo erectus, as it is shown, had eyeballs, had a nose, had basically everything that we have. It was just different shapes, and in other words, they didn't grow new organs. They didn't develop bones. They didn't. There was no speciation. So there's this sort of adaptation line that we're shown, and they're saying, see, evolution is real.
Yeah.
But whether that works or not is not the point. The point is that we have a lot of evidence of this other hominid species.
Yeah.
And then we have secondary evidence that this hominid species existed in the fact that there are tribes all over the world that try to make their skulls look like the skulls of this hominid species,
right.
Which indicates a sort of cultural memory of these people. And yet they're totally not acknowledged at all.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is doing a research project on the various legends that all of these individual little tribes that are isolated and everything have about their origins and stuff. And some of them have been documented. Many of them have been documented
and they talk about
Americas.
star people or civilizer gods.
So it'd be interesting to do that as a study on these tribes that had this as a practice. I know they're long since gone. They don't exist anymore.
Well,
the tribes that are doing it don't still do it today. This is a
right. Well, there might. Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know if there aren't any that do it.
I read that
on
Ancient Origins.
Oh, okay.
Just recently, so
okay. All right, cool.
So it's like that's.
But there are
another-
photos of people that were having it done, so it was very recent that they
Oh, okay.
stopped.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
Maybe I misread that.
Well, I'm just saying,
what
like,
they were saying is that one of the problems here is that we have this. You have the elongated skulls, which are natural, and then you have the
head
binding skulls, which are not natural.
Right. They're a mutilation.
And the tradition of head binding is so ancient that that's also a mystery.
Right.
So you got the mystery of these elongated skulls that are natural, and we don't have those guys walking around apparently. So we can't ask them about how they got long heads.
Right.
And then we have the skull binding thing, which is also an ancient tradition, and we don't have information about why that started. So there's just
right.
I guess that was their
and
point.
then and then another mystery is how is it that so many disparate, separated,
are doing the same thing.
separated in thousands of miles and sometimes many years in time, that these tribes that had this head binding.
Yeah, I think that was what it was saying, is that a lot of the tribes, or a lot of the remains that we found of civilizations or tribes or whatever, those tribes don't exist. Maybe there are some still in existence today.
Yes.
But these ones that are spread all around the world, lots of them they're no longer with us. So so we can't ask them, and we don't have their legends.
Right.
But it would be interesting to know the ones that do remain, where we can get their legends, why.
And and as far as I know, they say it is because it is a type of synchronicity with the gods, right?
Right.
It makes you somehow fit to rule.
So you have you can rule.
That's right. Rulers. They're supposed to be surveyors, damn it. So there are, like we've pointed out, some of the arguments against the idea that these elongated skulls are just humans that have somehow manipulated their skulls. And one of the really good ones that I forgot to mention in the previous segment is that there are unborn fetuses that have these elongated skulls. So there's no binding possible.
Oh.
Okay. So yeah, that really just kind of closes the whole.
Scarptards be damned!
That's right. Lost again, Scarptards. So that really closes the door on that concept that these really are a different hominid species, and there's no question about it. So, and the Paracas skeletons are not that old, as far as I know. And of course, we have the whole dating issue. They have long locks of red hair that was braided, right? So these Paracas skeletons, in a lot of cases, were mummified because where they were buried was the Atacama Desert, which is the most arid place on the planet. It gets like 0.00005 inches of rainfall a year or something like that.
Long locks of red hair.
Yeah.
Lovelock Cave.
Right. Come on, man. There were Vikings.
In Nevada.
There were Vikings that came from France. And that actually is another question. Like, wow, this Conehead skit. If you guys haven't seen it, just go on YouTube and look up Saturday Night Live Coneheads. Is it Bill Murray? Yeah, it's Bill Murray, and they're basically a family, and they have these incredibly long heads that are pointed. Where did that come from?
I don't know again.
Right. And yet they're walking around amongst humans, and they're trying to pretend that they totally don't have long heads, and they're just normal. And people are like, "What's the deal?" And they're like, "Nope, we are from France." They're obviously not humans. So there's this weird SNL joke about this concept. It was
I never really knew. I never thought about that. Where that?
Yeah, like, well, why would they do that? Where did it come from? Where did the idea come from? It's just very strange to me that this is.
We're gonna look up the writer. We'll talk about it next time.
He's probably committed suicide. 2 shots to the back of the head.
Yeah.
Thrown out a window. Tied to his chair.
Yep. Obvious suicide.
Obvious suicide.
Nothing
Case
to see
closed.
here.
Case closed.
But sir, his skull was kind of black. Nope.
That's right. There will not be an autopsy. Cremation. So, speaking of long heads, this is another segue here. Recently, there was a World Bank whistleblower a woman named Karen. What was her last name?
Is it like Hudes? Hudes?
Yeah, Hughes, something like that. Karen, and she was whistleblowing on the World Bank, and basically it was very interesting what she was saying about how they were manipulating global currencies and economy. And she was basically saying that there was a small group of elites that were running everything through the World Bank, through the IMF. That they used things like foreign aid to keep third world countries as third world countries. They used it, and it's like a non-intuitive thing. Like they give them money in order to keep them desperately poor and everything. But what was interesting is that she kind of made this radio. She kind of made the radio talk show, and she made the circuit of shows. She was on all these. She was being interviewed by all these people, and mainstream news was very interested in her because she was whistleblowing on the World Bank. I mean, and she had successfully sort of exposed a big corruption thing in the World Bank before, and then got herself. And then they fired her, and then she got herself rehired. And she had like her list of credentials is amazing. She's like she's Yale educated. She was a lawyer. She has worked in like all the top sort of Ivy League institutions. She's got an impeccable resume, and so she also had credibility like crazy, just credibility all over the place. And eventually she started to say, first she started to hint at it, and then I think it was Red Ice Radio, a sort of more paranormal, radio show / podcast, and I remember listening to the interview, and that guy was like, you seem to have something you're not quite saying, and she's like, well, I've been advised maybe not to say it because it's kind of strange, and he was like, well, there's no better place to say it than here.
Podcast.
That's right. Well, we're
made of snakes.
That's right. We're made of snakes. We talk about strange stuff all the time. So she started to talk, and when I was listening, it was very interesting. She started to talk about Akhenaten, an Egyptian pharaoh, right? She's like, have you seen? She's like, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. She's like, he was an Egyptian pharaoh, and then he, of course, the Red Ice Radio guy's like, Akhenaten? He knows exactly who it is. She's like, yes. If you look at him, he's got a very strange, and you can look up statues of Akhenaten. He's a very strange-looking individual, and the Egyptians were fantastic at capturing exactly what people look like. Their statues are just amazing. So Akhenaten, if you look at his statues, he is a very odd-looking guy. He's got this weird kind of pot belly. He doesn't look like a sort of wedge-shaped like Olympic swimmer kind of like all the other pharaohs are. They have
old muscular man.
Yeah, big wide shoulders and like narrow waist.
I am king.
No, he's got like he's got a little pot belly. He's got this incredibly long chin that sort of juts out. He's got this like long or wide and sort of narrow mouth. It's very strange looking. He's got a long nose, and his eyes are huge and far apart, and he's got this massively long elongated head. He's just a very weird looking guy. And his wife was the Queen Nefertiti, and there is a famous bust of her, in the museum, and you look at her from the side, she has a skull that would not look out of place on Alien, from the movie Alien. It is long. You're like, wait, that what? And their son was Tutankhamun. He was famous because we found his burial place undisturbed. Howard Carter, and I think it was it was maybe the 20s. It was in the early 1900s, I think. But anyway, they found it. It was one of the few. Most Egyptian tombs have been long before looted, and so we would find them, and stuff is pushed everywhere, and all the treasures are gone, and all the writings and everything's destroyed, and there are bones everywhere. But Tutankhamun's tomb was intact, had never been entered, and it was it blew everybody's mind, the beauty of the objects and everything. But if you look at Tutankhamun's mummy, you can look up pictures of him online and look at him from a profile view from the side, and he has an elongated head. It's not as pronounced as but you can see that he's got it. And that is not a normal shaped skull, right? So back to the whistleblower, Karen, she starts talking about Akhenaten, and she says that I don't remember her exact words, but basically what she's getting to is that there is this other race of hominids that have been on Earth
For thousands of
years, living alongside of humans. There's not nearly as many of them as us.
Because they died out, most of them died out at the end of the last
She
ice
said
age.
that they were very powerful in the last ice age.
That's right.
That is fascinating. But so there's still a few of them around, and they always end up in elite ruling positions. She said they have zero emotions, no empathy. They have very mathematical, logical minds. They're like computers almost. They have, their actions are bereft of any kind of caring. It's hard for me to tell how much of that is propaganda because of the whole like, oh, you have to care about stuff. I don't know.
And people in banks, they just don't care.
Yeah. It's like accentuating the fact that like they run the banks that they don't care about anyone. I don't know. I don't know how much of that is propaganda, but she says that because of her position in the World Bank, she was part of this council, and
She founded the council.
Yeah, she's a top lawyer, and she, worked with them for years and years. And she says that at some of the meetings they would go to, and at some of the meetings that some of her colleagues had been to, she had quite a few people who were on her side, but there's a group of them that are sort of whistleblowers on the entire global bank cartel economic thing, that they had been to meetings where there was a person there presiding over the meeting who had a drastically elongated head and many other features that they were not Homo sapiens, and she was like,
She's claiming that they're running the show.
That's right. They're running it, and the reason why there's all this corruption and all this, there's this huge scam going on. Like there's the LIBOR scandal, which like is so complicated that even the attorneys in the case don't really understand what's going on. But basically it has to do with people manipulating
tiny fractions
of exchange rates. It's weird.
Right.
Like there's exchange rates, and because the UN like basically queries all the world banks and says, what did you exchange rates with each other for, and then they set the exchange rate for that day based on an average of all that. And these banks have started to kind of collude with each other to sort of adjust tiny fractions of the exchange rates, and that results in them making trillions of dollars because they know. Since they've pre-decided what the exchange rate will be between each other, they can make a lot of money basically by investing in this or that currency just for that day. And so that's called the LIBOR scandal. And she says that stuff like that and other things, just all these scams going on.
Right, extremely complex scams.
Yeah, that basically result in like massive amounts of wealth flowing to these very few individuals.
Right. So you have something that broad and that
long in scope.
Tiny detailed scam that's extremely complicated and happening all over the place in different ways, all to funnel money to a very few channels.
Right.
And it's like, okay.
What?
Wow.
Right, and it's the kind of money it's the kind of money that can run governments. We're not talking about, like, if you're a person and you're wealthy, if you're already this wealthy, then funneling more of that money to you does not change your lifestyle one bit. You are already so wealthy that you won't notice more money, except for like maybe you can add zeros to your accounts or whatever. But it's hard to put this down to any kind of utility, any kind of. I mean, like I don't know. I maybe there is greed at that rarefied height where you're like, I've got so much money that more money can never do anything for me, but I just want more money. I don't know.
It's just a way to keep score.
Right. Yeah. So. And she just kind of vanished, by the way, from the, right after she said that, and she went on a couple more shows and was more open with it, and then she disappeared. Like it all stopped. She just disappeared from the and previous to that, she had been all over the place. She was trying to blow this whole story wide open, and I'm not sure. Were they able to successfully discredit her because they're like, look, this woman says aliens are running the World Bank,
which she didn't say.
Right.
She said another species of human.
Yeah, she said there were another species of human. So you can see that, like, I mean,
Greetings.
Many factions would have a reason to try to shut her down then. Especially, I mean, the evolutionists would not want that to be true.
Greetings.
And I don't think they're correct on this, but evolution does not like the idea of sort of side by side advanced human / hominids evolving together. They don't like that. They want like Neanderthal, for example, to be our direct ancestor, but they're not. They, especially within the past 5 or 10 years, it's been almost conclusively shown that we lived alongside of Neanderthal. They weren't our predecessors. We lived with them. We intermingled with them.
That screws up the linear development.
Right.
Which is what supports so many of these paradigms and all these different
right. And if you have if the evolutionary tree isn't a single branch, but it has many branches, then they start running out of fossils to use as our,
Right.
I don't know. I don't really know the reasons, but they don't like the co-evolving thing.
This point that you're making right now, see, I started looking at this in reverse. Like, it's not about... Okay, so the whole linear development idea that we need in order to support all these other paradigms of archaeological studies and everything else are needed. And it's like, well, they don't like to look at this evidence because it destroys that. But really, if there is another species of human that are alive that are doing what this lady says with the World Bank, and they are trying to keep humans, ourselves, down, and they're trying to control things, that is the reason why we need the linear development, why we need this very specific process of evolution so that there's only one species, because it's all done to hide the fact that they are here.
That's right. And that is a big conspiracy right
there.
That is Alex Jones worthy, like, I told you people they've been doing it for hundreds of years.
But seriously, there's what we talked about Jim Vieira and him going through the mounds of America and all these.
Right, that's another species entirely.
Right.
You're talking about the giants. We got the longheads, and then we got the Nephas.
We got the Nephas.
The Nephas with the double rows of teeth and the 6 toes and the 6 fingers.
Right. It's just like when I started looking at everything, especially when it comes to ancient texts that are always talking about these other dudes.
Right.
These other things.
There were
not
giants
human.
on the earth in those days.
Giants, non-human things, gods coming from the heavens.
What about Lincoln? By the way, you never mentioned the Lincoln thing. When you were doing I love that. That was the defining moment.
Right. That was so. In looking at there have been many accounts of giant skeletons discovered in the United States, mostly in the eastern portion of the country.
Southeastern, like in the fertile part.
Right. There's all these earthen mounds, big, large scale construction.
Hello.
Compared to teepees and middens.
Right.
Okay. And in these mounds, there are lots of stories. There are lots of news accounts of giant skeletons having been discovered
In the lowest levels. Yeah.
lowest levels buried in these things, and some of the skeletons up to like 16 feet. And,
Yep.
many
Wearing
of them,
plate.
many of them are like 7, 8, 9 feet. They have, some of them said to have been wearing copper armor, and almost all of them said to have this thing called double dentition, where they have 2 rows of teeth.
And it was not just because you can look up double dentition and you'll see all these horrible pictures. On
No,
Google.
they were
right. They're all these horrible pictures of people who have like flawed, dentistry, where basically they've got a second row of
Their
teeth trying to
baby
come in
teeth
and
and
just
their
like
adult
destroys.
teeth all- Yeah.
And their mouths look like
these
bird's nests.
their
Yeah.
teeth were healthy.
Right. It's always mentions that they had 2 rows of teeth and they were flawless.
Right. So there's all of this, and when I was researching all of that, it was just like, wow. And then there's this quote that I was watching a Jim Vieira video where he was giving a presentation on all of these stone chambers in the Northeast that have crazy alignments, and they're lunar eclipse predictors and solar eclipse predictors, and they're all
they're
all this
colonial
crazy
root
stuff.
tellers.
Anyway, he was tying that into this possible existence of of a species of giants. Anyway, in his presentation, he quotes Abraham Lincoln. Well, he doesn't quote him. He reads a quote from one of Abraham Lincoln's.
It was a speech he never delivered.
Right,
But
a
that he
speech
did
wrote
write.
in his diary, and it was to be delivered at Niagara Falls. And in that speech, he says he's talking about looking at the falls and realizing like how much time has gone by, and just the amazing aspects of nature. And in the speech, he says something along the lines, I'm going to paraphrase, but quote the best I can. It's that ancient species of giant whose bones fill the mounds of America gazed on these falls as ours do now.
Yeah.
And all the skirptards are like, he was talking about mammoths. Like, yeah, okay.
Didn't know that part.
Yes. They try to say he was talking about mammoth bones, which fill the mounds of America. Like, come on.
There aren't
dude.
any mammoths in the bounds.
There are some bones of mammoths that were used, as they made tools and stuff out of some of the mammoth bones. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
But he was comparing us to hairy elephants. That's great.
So, I share a birth date, February 12th, with Abraham Lincoln. That's my birthday.
Careful, you're doxing yourself.
And what?
Doxing basically means you're giving away too much personal information, and now people can get all your personal information.
Oh yeah. My social security number is 277-492-5545. Anyway, yeah. So ever since I was a kid, I don't know. My mom told me, hey, you have the same birthday as Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, cool. So I'm always fascinated by this guy, and learned a lot about him or whatever. And like, I'm just way later watching this video, and this Lincoln quote comes up, and I'm like, what? And that really was the catalyst. Like, I was looking at all of these things thinking, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But then I heard that, and I was like, no freaking way, dude.
Like, it was so well accepted in Lincoln's time
Yes.
that the president of the United States was prepared to say it in a speech he was about to give.
Right. So I looked that speech up, and sure enough, Jim Vieira was right. And it's right there. I'm just like, man. Anyway, that was a tangent, just to
That was a great tangent.
yeah, just to like sort of
But
emphasize the point that I now believe there are and were a different species of human or whatever
hominids, yeah. So, but what happens is if you accept, and we're out of time here for this segment. So,
Well, no.
what happens is, just keep that in mind.
Man, you keep getting screwed here.
What happens is, we leave now, and we'll come back later. Snake Bros. Came up out of the valley of glass and said, let us take apples and root them in the dark to make bricks. And with these bricks, we shall make a book in which we shall put our face. And we shall take this book of face and spread it across the net, tumble it across the net, so that we shall not be scattered across the face of the earth. Just quoting there from the Book of Nerds, chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Brothers of the Snake podcast.
Snake Bros.
We are in our 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, and we shall continue on the most recent tangent, which is like tangent 7.6. Yep. So, where was I going with that? We were talking about longheads and whistleblowers and massive conspiracies, ancient giants. So on the giant issue, so I was trying to say right before the break there that in accepting the giant, the whole giant issue, the fact that there were giants found in these mountains, you also have to come to grips with the fact that has been completely repressed. Is to totally, all that information is hidden. They found hundreds of these giant skeletons, and the evidence is still there.
There were hundreds of news articles written about it.
Right, and not just that. You can find it in scientific journals, and you can find it in the Smithsonian's own reports. There's one called it's like the 12th Annual Report to the Bureau of Ethnology. Okay, and if you look that up, 12th Annual Report to the Bureau of Ethnology. and just put that in there plus Smithsonian Institution, you will find this report. It's 400 pages of horribly scanned documents that I read through, and it's basically details all these archaeologists that were attached to the Smithsonian Institution that were basically going all across the North America, the United States, investigating every mound that they knew about and excavating them, and they time and again they're reporting finding very large, very tall skeletons, and often they were at the lowest levels of the mound. So you had the mound was each level had many humans buried on it, presumably Native Americans, American Indians, and they would be buried on this. And then below that there would be an older level of older skeletons, and below that, and it would go all the way to the ground level, and then below ground level, sometimes in a stone sarcophagus, in a stone box, there would be a single or sometimes a pair of gigantic human-like hominid skeletons that were anywhere from 7.5 to sometimes 12, up to 16 feet tall. There were reports of stone tablets that had strange hieroglyph texts on them, and in a lot of these reports, at least in the newspaper reports, so you can see the investigations happening in the Bureau of Ethnology report, and then you can find that same town and go look up newspapers from that same town at the same time and find newspaper reports about the same dig, and they would say, swords were found that appeared to be, that were still shining, that hadn't rusted away, and and this is like in Mississippi where everything's wet all the time, so it should be gone. But they found metal swords, and they found the stone tablet with strange hieroglyphs on it, and people from the Smithsonian had taken it and saying, and the journalists would often say something like, and we expect to have a translation soon, and nothing is ever heard about any of these artifacts again. The giants, or sometimes they'll find a giant and it'll say that it was displayed in the local men's club for a long time, where people could come look at this huge jawbone of this giant skull with the double rows of teeth that were flawless. Another interesting thing I noticed a lot of times this is a tangent, but on the teeth, it would say things like the teeth there was not a single one missing, so they didn't have they didn't have dental problems. They didn't get cavities and their teeth didn't fall out. They would say they were flawless, and that they were also heavily worn. In some cases, worn almost down to, to the jaw itself. So that implies great age.
Yes.
So something that was this being that had this huge head with all these perfect teeth lived long enough to wear his teeth down almost to the nub, not by having dental problems, but by just using them for presumably hundreds of, how long would it take? The enamel is the hardest substance in the human body. The teeth enamel, So, in accepting that the giants are real, and that is a phrase that we use, by the way, to signify, when you say sometimes the giants are real, it means like sometimes this weird stuff is true.
Right.
And that changes your entire perspective. So when you accept that there was this phenomenon that people were finding they really were finding these skeletons, including the Smithsonian, and accredited archaeologists and scientists and doctors looked at them. Once you accept that, you also have to accept that somebody took great pains to hide this, and it was completely erased from the curriculum. Like it was never entered into the schooling. So modern day people, they have no idea.
Yeah.
And yet in Lincoln's time, it was common enough knowledge for him to put it in his speech and not expect it to be weird, right? So it has been wiped from our cultural memory, and that is a serious that's serious, okay? And because hundreds of accounts, thousands. So where did all these skeletons go? Where did all this evidence go? And you would see the reports, and it would say men from the Smithsonian Institute, and sometimes they would show up like somebody would find a skeleton in an unexpected place, like not in a mountain, right? They would just be digging a cellar or something. They would come across a stone box in there, and there would be this giant skeleton. And like men, quote unquote, men from the Smithsonian would arrive like the next day. And we're talking about in a time period where it took weeks for a guy on a horse to get your letter to another state. And so no one knew that there was, they just men from the Smithsonian just show up the next day and like, we'll take that. And so in some cases, I'm like, I don't think...
They were wearing black suits and carried flashy thingies.
That's right. Men in black, stealing giants. Damn it. So, some very strange things. So yes, you have to to accept the giants, you must also accept the hiding the giant skeletons theory or conspiracy theory, and that just opens up a whole can of worms, and that connects to the longheads. Obviously, somebody has taken pains to conceal. Most people don't know about these elongated skulls, and you would think that it would be. I mean, anytime that there's this sort of an announce like, whoa, they found a new human ancestor, it's like in every major news thing, like, oh, Sahelanthropus been named with one tooth and a fragment of a cranium. And they name him, and they've got and they tell you what they did and what their culture was like and where they lived, and But we have thousands of these, and not a word.
Right. As far as the giants go, the scriptards say that that this was like a big sham back in the day that became really popular.
Right. It was newspaper hoaxes.
Yeah, and it was like these guys going around with the traveling circus, and they're showing off all this weird stuff, and it just became this big,
Right, the carnival.
Yeah, it became this big thing that it was a fad. Okay, to make up these stories and
that is true. There are some cases where that did happen. There were hoaxes of giants, and they were taken around in those type of traveling circuses and sort of as a in the freak show thing or whatever. They had this giant coffin, and there's this like corpse-looking thing wrapped up in there.
But Lincoln actually wanted to tour all of the mounds and go and look at these places, and he did that.
Yeah.
He went all across the country and visited all these different places and saw them himself.
Right.
And then of course the scriptards are like,
mammoths.
No, he was fooled by all these people telling him all this BS and whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, okay. Yeah.
Proof?
None. Just
None.
They're just mad because if like Russ is saying, you accept the giants, then it changes everything.
Right. The giants, in this case, are the opening of the rabbit hole. Because then you have to accept that there's this seemingly massive conspiracy to conceal the giants. Right. And then that just opens the door to all kinds of crap.
Right. Well, and then going back to this Karen Koods, or how do you ever even pronounce her last name? she's pointing out that there's not very many of them. And
these are the longheads, not the giants.
Right, the longheads. But I'm just saying, this other species of hominid, they don't want to be widely known.
Right, and so they're the hoaxers, really. The hoax is that the giants didn't exist,
right,
and that the longheads aren't real, and that it was just headbine. That's the hoax.
There's another thing you brought up to me multiple times about some of these tombs, quote unquote, that have been found.
Oh yeah,
that were quote unquote looted.
Right. So, and this most often I see this in China, but it has happened in other places too. Where I have a what I call a weird news feed, which is it's got all my paranormal news sources and everything, and it just so I can scroll through and see all the headlines of the various places that I trust to give me proper weird news, non-fake weird news, right? And they'll give these fantastic descriptions of a new sort of a royal tomb that's been opened in China, and they're describing it's got 12 golden chariots in it, and it's got rooms racked with bronze and brass and copper weapons and halberds and swords and all this. I mean, just tons of cases of jewelry, whole suits of armor that are made out of various precious metals and jewels and everything.
How tall are those suits of armor?
Right, how tall are the suits of armor? And then they'll say that the primary sarcophagus, the big stone box that was in the center of all this stuff, that was obviously meant to hold the remains of the royal that was buried here, was empty because the place had been looted. And it's like the looters took the body and left the loot.
Yes, they did.
Right. That's the point. Right. The answer to that is yes, but the point of that is think about that. Who is stealing the skeleton and leaving the loot? And can you really call them looters?
Yeah.
Because loot is about cash, really.
They're tomb robbers.
Right. They are grave robbers. That's right.
So
they're there
Didn't you tell me that one of the sarcophagi? Mm-hmm. It was huge.
Yeah,
inside this tomb.
They're often huge, but they always pass that off as because they were like the Russian dolls that had, there's one inside the other, inside the other, inside the other, and the Egyptians did do that. If you the exterior Egyptian sarcophagus for a pharaoh, or whatever, was a giant stone box, but inside that was a wooden case that had his face and everything on it, and then inside that was another case. And you open that one, and there's another one, and then finally you get all the way down, and he's nestled in there, all wrapped up and everything.
And he's small. Kind of sounds like similar to head binding.
Yeah.
Why did
I'm
they
in this
make
giant box.
Right.
But I'm a little guy.
living space?
That's right. Phenomenal cosmic sarcophagus. Living space.
Itty bitty dead space.
That's right. Oh yeah, dead space. Sorry. So yeah, this
Space.
and so many sarcophagi in Egypt that have been open or empty. A lot, I remember there were several on live TV. That really embarrassed people when this happened. They've never done it again. You don't do archaeology stuff that you haven't done yet on live TV, because you're gonna get embarrassed. Because it's not gonna be what you want it to be, because your story's wrong.
Unless you're Snake Bros.
That's right.
Where we don't care if we're dumb.
Right. Because what we'll say is, we don't know what's gonna happen. Check this out. So, yeah, I think it was Zahi Hawass who was doing it, and they were down in this something called the Serapeum. I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Serapeum. And in that, this is a place of underground tunnels cut in rock, and in it there are huge granite sarcophagi made from the single pieces of granite, and they're impossible.
Can't even get them down there.
Yeah. First of all, there's one that's left in one of the corridors, and it's so big that you have to kind of squeeze past it. I've got pictures of people trying to sort of inch their way past this huge sarcophagi, and there's no room. There's barely any room between the outside of the sarcophagi and the wall of the corridor, so you can't. And they weighed hundreds of tons.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. Isn't sarcophagi the plural? Sarcophagus?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I using it wrong? Probably.
Yeah, there was a huge sarcophagi.
Oh yeah. Well, no, there are many sarcophagi, but there is a huge sarcophagus in the corridor.
Not trying to correct you. I was just like,
cool.
wait, I
That's
wasn't
good.
sure.
Yeah, definitely correct it. But they had to actually, they had to gouge out one of the walls next to the sarcophagus in order to get around it, because it just blocked the whole corridor. And so the idea of them moving these incredibly heavy weights with a million dudes with ropes doesn't work, because you can't get a million dudes with ropes in this little tunnel.
Yeah.
Right?
You just need one dude with a ram's horn.
Right, and all the legends talk about them.
The walls of the sarcophagus fell down.
Damn it! You used the Jericho horn. Get out of here.
Stop.
Fired. You're fired.
Aziz! Light!
Aziz, light! Thank you, Aziz. These sarcophagi they're perfect. His name's Chris Dunning.
Christopher Dunn?
Christopher Dunn. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Christopher Dunn, is a machinist and an engineer, and he builds machine parts in his machine shop, and they have to have tolerances of 10,000ths of an inch. So he's got all these modern engineering measuring tools to check for for the exactness of of corners of things. And so he went and checked on these. He checked these sarcophagi, and the inside they're made out of a single block of granite. They cut the top of it off to make the lid, and it's got a lip, right? And the lid's huge. It weighs like 70 tons, and then the inside of the box is cut into these square, and it's polished. It looks like a mirror in there.
70 tons.
For the lid, yeah. And so he's in there, and he's got his laser, and he's got this tool to measure corners, and he says that the precision is so high that it's beyond the ability of his tools to measure, and they can measure into the 10,000ths of an inch.
Oh my god.
Okay. So, and that's really hard when you're cutting exterior corners where an outside corner is difficult, but when you're doing it on the inside, you're basically hollowing the box out to get those corners perfect. And he says that not only is each individual corner exactly 90 degrees, but that they also are very precisely correct within relation to each other, yes, and to the lid, right? So in all dimensions, the corners are all perfect, so that lid, when it slides on, it goes, and the line that's where you can tell that there's a lid on there just almost disappears. It's so perfect that when it slides on, it looks like a single piece. Okay.
Wow.
And they're they are magnificent creations, and it is just not. It's not clear, and so they open them and they're empty. And there's many of these. So and the theory was that these weren't
some of them like filled to the brim with sand?
Yeah, there were a few that were filled to the brim with like earth and fragments of animal bones.
That's right. Yeah, all these bits
all
and
these
pieces
various
of,
they're tiny little fragments
of
like
a bull.
Yes, like somebody had shattered it, like never come alive again. It was like beating up the zombie bull or whatever. But and that was the idea, that these were the sarcophagi of the Apis bull. That was every 20 years there was a sort of a big, massive, sort of nationwide ritual of the Apis bull arriving, and there was this whole procession, and they would ritualistically slaughter it, and then
ritualistically crush its bones into tiny bits.
Yeah, that part was not known about. Look at the bones. Yeah, so most of them were empty, and that, so you're like, wait, who did all this work to not use these boxes?
Unless they were used, and what was in them was needed.
That's the point. Yeah, somebody came and took what was in them out of them before somebody else who wasn't in on the secret opened them and saw.
Good luck out there.
And that is the tangent of the sarcophagi being empty.
Right, and if you think of it,
and leaving all the gold.
Only until very recently have we really had the ability to get into these boxes in the first place. I mean, you need some pretty good technology to get into the granite box. You cannot do it with a copper chisel and some stone. You need steel, and you'll have to, you can destroy it. Some gunpowder to blast it or whatever. So think about that. These are vaults that once that lid is on there, it is sealed. And if you are, if you're trying to hide, I don't know, if you're trying to hide some non-human species or whatever, or even if your idea is like, we can revive these guys later when we need them, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, but you don't want humans to be able to get in this box, that is exactly what you build. Giant, impossibly heavy granite sarcophagi that have such precision that when the lid slides on, you cannot get it off there.
Yeah.
Without like a lot of machinery to kind of grab the lid and lift it evenly on all corners and stuff. In other words, you couldn't open that box if you were a human up until very recently. So I find all that stuff fascinating. It's the same as a vault. That lid might as well be a lock, a big safe door. So,
all of these strange things with missing sarcophagi or missing skeletons and all this stuff in the sarcophagi in a tomb that still has all of the riches of gold.
Looted tombs that are unlooted.
Right. We add that to this whole mystery of the giants and the longheads,
right.
Because again, if you accept that they were here or that they are here, then you have to accept that there's something of a cover-up going on, and this is a connection to that. Like, why are these skeletons missing when we break into the tombs? And apparently, nobody's ever been in there.
Right.
It's sealed. And we get into it, and there's all of the riches.
Right.
Those skeletons.
Which definitely, that pretty much indicates that no human's been in there, because the human is not interested in those skeletons.
Give me the gold.
That's right. Give me that gold. That guy's got a giant skull, but I don't care. Gold. Right. So, if there's a cover-up going on, it must be modern. And that leads you to, whoever's doing the cover-up exists now.
Right.
And that's
what Karen was trying to tell us.
Right. Maybe you could make some arguments for why humans would want to do this cover-up, but that's kind of hard to believe. I don't know. Maybe you could say, well, there's a select group of humans that know about this, and that these hominid species that are no longer extant, but they, for some reason, don't want us to find out about them, so they go to all this effort to hide,
But still,
that's hard to believe.
The fact that the idea that they did exist, no matter what, even if it's humans hiding it now, and not giants or longheads hiding it now.
Yeah.
If they have nothing to do with the conspiracy, it doesn't matter. Still, the point is that you have to rewrite the history book in your mind. What you know,
And to me,
everything that you've been taught in terms of
you basically have to just completely throw out everything you've thought about the history of the world.
Right.
and then start to rebuild it anew. That's what we do all the time. We're taking another look at history and saying what really happened. Now that we know these various things, let's see how that changes the picture, because it does. It changes it. I mean, like,
and it's interesting how that change, or the changes that come from even if it's a thought experiment, you start seeing how all of these other things make sense.
Right, it starts to make sense out of a lot of stuff when you're like, That, like, for instance, one that's been bothering me for, I think I've been following this for 7 years now.
7 years I followed this
7 years I followed this study. There's something in Egypt called the labyrinth. It's been almost mythical in modern times, but Herodotus, the Greek historian, some people call him the father of lies, and it's usually when they don't like what he said, right? But then when they like what he said, he's like the bearer of truth, because like they're like, Herodotus wrote this, it's truth.
Nowadays,
what about this about
the father of fake news?
The father of fake news. Get out of here, Herodotus. Terrible. So he wrote about this thing called the labyrinth, and he basically tells the story of being allowed entry into this place, and he describes the fact that it was this immense building in Egypt. It was huge, and it had hundreds and hundreds of rooms inside of it that were arranged in such a way that were very confusing to like an outsider, so that outsiders weren't even let in without a guide who was basically somebody who resided in it, and because he said you would get lost almost immediately. But it wasn't designed as a maze, it just was a maze because of the way the rooms were situated. But he said that the roof was a single slab, just a single gigantic slab of stone. That was the roof. Okay, so after building the labyrinth, they lifted a single slab of this huge stone. This building is acres in size. Wow. Okay, and so this is one of the reasons why people are like, he's lying. That's not a real building, because no one could live. No one's gonna pick up a single slab and put it. They were just like, they pointed to that and said, this is why it's a lie, which is, Anyway, he describes being led through this place and that it was full of all the knowledge that Egypt had both saved and inherited. That this was the place where they kept all of their ancient knowledge, and the rooms were full, like from floor to ceiling, with papyri scrolls that were held in like these bronze or brass or copper tubes, and all of them were ordered and everything, and stacked on the walls. And then some rooms had shelves and shelves of books, like what we would see as books, but they were made of metal plates of various types of metals that didn't corrode, so gold. He said orichalcum they used, which we don't really know what that is, but it's a mixture of gold and something else, probably. He said it's kind of reddish color. Anyway, so the place was fabulously wealthy with all this precious metals, but they were using it to make books. And the reason they were doing that is because these books presumably were meant to last for thousands and thousands of years. Whereas, a paper book, it won't last that long. It just... So he was led through the upper level, and this has always intrigued me, that he said that he was not allowed to go to the lower level of the labyrinth because the building had 2 floors. And he said he wasn't allowed to go to the lower level because the priests there told him that was where the crocodile kings were buried. And what does that mean?
Snakes!
Crocodile kings! Man. It's like snakes for sure.
Yeah, that makes me think of this... is it a Sumerian carving? It's a statue, a little statue.
The Ubaid statues.
It's like this. It looks like a crocodile standing upright, like half man, half crocodile.
Yeah, and there's ones where they're female. They got the little baby crocodile.
Yes.
It's like nursing, and they have this really long snake head and snake eye. Yeah. Crocodile kings. It's like, is that the followers of Horus? I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, they were straight up. He just said that they wouldn't let him go down there because that was a sacred place where the crocodile kings were buried. And presumably, the crocodile kings built the place. The Egyptians were just the
caretakers.
The caretakers at the time. Yeah. But
what was the place called?
It was called the Labyrinth. And this,
the Labyrinth.
Yeah. So to finish out the story, it's fascinating. Like, it's been considered a legend, a myth, a lie from the father of lies. And that part is not the bearer of truth, because they didn't like what he's saying. Well, I guess the guy you would call the father of modern archaeology, and definitely the father of Egyptology. His name was Petrie. I can't remember his full name right now, but he basically was an Englishman who was very methodical and very scientific in his study of ancient Egypt and all. He did a lot of excavations, worked in the Great Pyramid, just all over Giza. He went to investigate the labyrinth legend, and we know this because of his writings. He went out there and he found out in the desert near another pyramid, which I again can't remember. I should have looked this up. I can't remember which pyramid it's next to, but I've looked at it. And so he went out into the desert and found this massive stone square out in the desert. And in his writings, you can tell that he considers that this was the site of the legendary labyrinth. It was in the right place, according to what he could tell from Herodotus' writings and some other legends he had found. But in his estimation, this was the foundation, and the entire building had been swept away. And he left it at that. He just left it at that. Well, much more recently, within the past 10 years, a group of students Egyptology students from Egypt and many other countries managed to get their hands on a newer model GPR technology, one that you kind of pushed around and it got a really good, clear
ground penetrating radar.
Yeah, sorry, ground penetrating radar. So it can give you a good image of what's below the ground. And this one was very sophisticated. And they went out to the place where Petrie went. It was lost also, so it had been lost again. But they did a bunch of studying and figured out. They thought he went to this particular spot, and they were basing it off the pyramid that he said was nearby. So they go there, and they take this GPR, and they run it up and down and up and down, and they get, and they said that there was the big slab there, the foundation that Petrie had found. Well, they run the GPR back and forth and find out that that's the roof. That was the roof. Yes. And it was a single piece of stone.
Yes.
Just like Herodotus said. That was, like I said, 70 years. Okay, that was 7 years ago when that report came out about they had discovered the labyrinth of Egypt. You could see in the GPR all these columns in the different room. You could get the layout. It was a crazy maze. Okay, it has never been excavated.
Low hanging fruit.
Never been. No one's ever even tried. Those students, they've got a webpage, their webpage up where they put it up and they were like, we're trying to get funding something. Somebody help us out here because we came back with all this data and we were so excited and no one wants to look at it. No one wants to even.
And that could,
that could be
when we hear stuff like that, it's like this is another part of the conspiracy to cover up.
Right. Because you don't want anybody finding the Crocodile Kings, and you don't want anybody finding all that ancient knowledge.
Right.
Because if somebody does get into the labyrinth, the Crocodile Kings are down there.
Yeah. Damn it!
Yeah. Plus the floor that Herodotus saw. Think of that. Millions of ancient books made of metal that will not corrode. That have all this ancient knowledge.
We need to go there and put our faces in those books.
That's right.
Dang it. Books. And spread them out.
That's right.
Using a web.
That's right. You're gonna post on the wall about cats.
And we shall make quotes like birds.
Make quotes like birds. So I don't know whether to connect that to the big conspiracy of hiding ancient stuff, or just to just say, because it could be either one. To just say that Egyptologists don't want this open.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say is that there's so many.
The reason they don't want it. Yeah.
You start looking at Egyptology in general and all of the things that they don't care about.
Right.
And that they.
But it's hard for me to say, do they not care about that because they don't want it to change their paradigm?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just so many things like that. It's like they don't want to look at that information. They don't want. Number one, the Minister of Antiquities or whatever, Zahi Hawass, would not allow GPR.
That's right.
To be done on Giza. He let some team of guys do it
near the Sphinx.
Sphinx one time.
And that was before he was the head honcho.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I don't have my timeline right. But anyway.
No, because he became head honcho very soon after that, and that
And then it all stops.
And they found chambers beneath the
Same thing with Gantenbrink or whatever.
Yeah, Rudolf Gantenbrink.
Yeah, he did the study on the.
Oh man, I got to do a whole show on that guy.
Right.
The stuff he found
Yeah, we got to do that. We're at the end of the segment here, but basically, Gantenbrink did a study on the
Gantenbrink was the one that ran the robot up the shafts and found the door, the famous, infamous door at the end of the shaft
in the Queen's
from
chamber.
the Queen's chamber.
Of the
And
Great
then he
Pyramid.
was kicked out of Egypt and never allowed to return. 10 years later, they opened that door with another robot from somebody else, and he has still not been allowed to return and is not given credit for that discovery.
Oh, and also, I wanted to point this out earlier when you were saying they don't do these live things for archaeology anymore.
Yeah.
Well, they did that live.
So they said,
And then they open the door and they're like, there's nothing behind it.
yeah, what's behind this? Another door.
No big deal. Nothing to see here, folks.
Right.
Show over. By the way, they have a model
Yeah.
of the interior of the pyramid.
Yep. And the shafts. It
Looks
can't-
the same.
Yep. So they probably ran that model up the model.
That's another conspiracy altogether. But anyway,
Yeah. I don't know.
we are at the end of the segment. The first half of the second hour is now.
So many questions, so little time.
There's one thing that we are sure of. That Snake Bros will continue.
That's right. Serpents.
Well, we're not really sure of that because we could get hit by it.
Portal. Portal.
Soon to be experts, but nevertheless noobs in a cube. Podcasting. This is only the beginning. Welcome back to Snake Bros, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, where we continue on the big conspiracy and small conspiracies alike. And
Snakes.
snakes. Thank you for saving my intro.
I knew I'd have to throw it in there somewhere.
All right, so
Yeah, we're gonna have a big shift here, right? Get it?
yeah, big shift.
Isn't it fun?
Wait.
Climate shift.
Oh,
So, question: is climate change real? Answer is yes. Absolutely, it's real. Now, how many of you, when you heard me say that, when you heard me say, is climate change real, did you think that I meant, is man-made climate change real?
I didn't.
Shut up.
Come on, Snake Bro.
Yeah, the point there is that this kind of sort of muddling of the terms, climate change, when somebody says climate change, like 99% of the time they mean APG, like, you know, anthropogenic global warming, or AGW. That's what they mean. But they say climate change, and they're like, "Is climate? You believe in climate change?" Well, yeah, everybody does. Climate changes. But what they mean is, do you believe that humans are destroying the climate? Now, are humans affecting the climate? Absolutely. They are absolutely affecting the climate. The climate is a closed system with with one outside driver, the sun, right? And in a closed system, anything within that system must have an effect on the system. It cannot do anything else. So anything we do has an effect. So then the question becomes, so modern climate change, the climate shifts we see, are humans like solely or majorly responsible for that? That's not possible to answer. And the reason it's not possible to answer is because we don't understand the natural causes of climate change, which we know have happened because you can look at the geological history of the planet. You can see it in the rocks. You know, all the fossils we have. It's not disputed at all that the climate has been in constant shift and change throughout the entire history of the planet, and that it has become massively catastrophic multiple times. So, without
Now-
any help from us.
We noticed that there are stable periods.
Right. But they're stable in the sense that they fluctuate
Mildly.
within a certain range. Right. In other words, the climate has never not changed. Never. So, there are natural causes for climate change that presumably are still in effect. They, nothing turned them off. So the argument that is made that humans are solely the cause of modern climate change, the way I usually see it said is that we have overwhelmed all natural processes. Okay. To argue whether or not that's true is pointless. It's unnecessary. Because you can stipulate that. Let's assume that it is true that all natural causes for climate change have been completely overwhelmed by humans' activity within the biosphere. That our output of CO2 and so on and so forth have completely overwhelmed natural causes, and now all climate change that we see, all weather patterns, everything, are solely the cause of human activity. Let's just go ahead and say that's true, stipulated for the purposes of the discussion. Then let's further say that somehow, on a global scale, we managed to all unite, all nations and all peoples, we all unite and say we are going to try to stop this all together. Okay? And then let's further stipulate that we actually enact every single measure that that environmentalists and climate change advocates want us to enact to stop climate change. And let's say further that those things, once enacted, actually work the way that they say they're going to, which I very highly doubt. But let's stipulate all that. And so, in the end, what you have is the entire human race, having agreed to do all this, having enacted all these things, have basically we've driven ourselves back to an almost technology-free society that has very, very low energy usage. Right, we're all practically vegetarians. We can't eat meat anymore, so we've gone back to basically living in the trees. Okay, we don't have good sources of energy.
Pre-industrial revolution.
Right, pre-industrial revolution energy outputs, and even less than that because they burned a lot of coal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
and they raised a lot of cows.
Right, so and in doing that, we have completely eradicated the human effect on climate. It's success.
Yeah.
Well, the natural drivers pick back up and eventually become catastrophic, and except that the human race is in a dampened state without any tools or any way of dealing with it, and so it's pointless.
Yeah. So how would we deal with the natural processes at that point?
Yeah, we couldn't.
We wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, we would have so curtailed ourselves in order to deal with us causing all the problems that we would be helpless.
Yeah. Then completely subject to the natural causes.
Right, which we know exist, and we know
Are going to
they
take place.
they have and will become catastrophic again. There's cycles of catastrophe that are natural in all throughout Earth history. So if we say that the climate change advocates are 100% right in everything they say, and then we do 100% of the things they want us to do, and all of it works exactly like they say it will still be destroyed by a climate disaster.
Yeah, I would like to add this. Doing all of the things that they suggest that we do also requires inventing stuff we have not invented.
Right.
So that's one of the things. Like, we need to stop doing all of this, and then we need to invent a bunch of stuff that is
Right.
Like,
They claim that we can replace our energy with renewable energy that will be almost just as
quote
good.
unquote renewable energy.
Right,
as
but
though
the thing
other
is,
types aren't.
But the thing is that we can't use it according to their own rules because using those energy sources, even though they wouldn't be putting out CO2, still generate heat, still would destroy all kinds. So in order to do what they say we need to do, which is to stop all human effects on the climate, we would have to drastically lower our energy output.
Right. My point was that they're also talking about we need to focus on these alternative energy sources, which
Don't really,
in order to actually use them to the degree that we need them to maintain a stable
we couldn't.
So it requires things that don't exist yet is my point.
Right.
That's one of the things that they say we should do. You should just should just do what you can't do yet.
Right, and you can't build any of the things that they want to build to use without the current energy structure that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like the amount
Battery powered cars are
coal-powered cars.
right. That's right.
Yeah. How do you like that coal-powered car you're driving around there?
Yeah.
But the point I was getting at really is that the question of whether or not I believe in climate change, or anybody believes in climate change, is immaterial, and whether or not we're causing it is immaterial, because the fact is that the climate is changing and will become catastrophic. Those are the facts. Whether it's us or not doesn't matter. It will become catastrophic. Now so the question then becomes like, what are we going to do about it? If we are able to somehow stop us causing it from becoming catastrophic, nature will still cause it to become catastrophic. So that isn't the solution. That's effectively a head in the sand solution, right? So I think that the solution is to go the other direction. Like, instead of dampening ourselves down and like curtailing everything we're doing and trying to stop, what we need to do is go the other way and use as much energy as we can to develop a bunch of things we don't have yet, so that we can, number one, get off this planet.
Right. Because, okay, what you're getting at is ultimately the real solution is that we have to get off this planet to save ourselves, because we can't stop the natural causes of cataclysm.
Because the natural causes, number one, are totally not understood. Like, we don't know, and they're not bothering to study them because everyone's so concerned with what humans are doing, that all study of natural causes has pretty much, well, not all of it, but there are billions and billions of dollars every year put into the study of AGW, anthropogenic global warming. In other words, human causes on the climate, and that almost all of that is focused on CO2.
Right.
That almost no work is being done elsewhere. There's a lot of data being gathered, but none of that is being correlated to natural causes. There's a few groups that are doing it, but there's 30 here, 20 there, but the vast majority of climate scientists are working on human-caused climate change solely. And even in that, solely the climate change being caused by human CO2 output. That's sort of troubling, because CO2 is the breath of life for plants. Plants need CO2 to survive, 100%, and we need plants. And actually, if you look historically in the past millions of years, when you can see this in ice cores and everything, that the global CO2 levels are at their low end of what they have been historically. The CO2 levels have been much higher than this before. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get at is the argument is kind of, I wish we could get around the argument of whether or not humans are causing it or not, and all that stuff, because to me, I'm just like, what are we going to do about it? Because it's going to happen.
Right, so what they are all talking about doing about it all has to do with human activity.
Right, and you can...
Now, there are certain things like, NASA's looking out there for rocks flying around.
Right.
And they're like, oh, well...
And I believe that's probably most of the climate changes in the past have been caused by a rock. And it's really easy to explain. If a large rock impacts Earth on land, it throws a ton of dust in the air and causes like a nuclear winter, right? So the impact is on land, throws a giant plume of debris, dust in the air, and a bunch of giant globs of molten stuff that fly all over the planet and fall down and set every freaking forest on fire. And that puts up a ton of soot and
CO2.
Right, and CO2. It sets every forest on fire. It burns all the plants, and then so you got all this ash and soot going up in the air from these massive forest fires. You got all the dust and everything thrown up in the air from the impact itself, and then you have every volcano on the planet exploding because of the impact, sends seismic crap throughout the planet, and every volcano explodes and throws a ton more. So you end up with this nuclear winter, it would literally be pitch black. It wouldn't be like hazy clouds across the sun. This would be a shroud over the Earth that would block almost all sunlight for 50 to 100 years in some cases. So the Earth would freeze. It would be the beginning of an ice age. Now, if the impact happens in the ocean, in deep ocean, it throws a ton of water vapor up into the air, and water vapor is
the primary greenhouse gas.
That's exactly right. It is by far the biggest cause of greenhousing of any of the gases in the atmosphere. So an impact in deep ocean throws billions and billions and billions of billions of tons of water up into the atmosphere and causes a huge greenhousing effect. Plus, it sends giant tidal waves all over the place and it destroys the whole surface. But with a land impact, you get a freezing cold planet, you get an ice age. With a water impact, you get a warm age, an interglacial. So it's very simple to see how that could be the causes of glacial and interglacial ages. Back and forth, back and forth. But the back and forth, the sort of cyclical back and forth that we see, implies that we're getting enough impacts that that they come with enough regularity to where you can sort of guarantee that we're going to get one of this kind and one of that kind. And that part's weird to me.
Well, going back to Graham Hancock's books, I think he talked about
a torrid stream.
A comet that had come close to the Earth, and the tail of the comet was in the path of the orbit of the planet, right? Mm-hmm. And it had come so close that there was just like all of this stuff left in its tail that we basically ran into. Yes. And that stuff's also traveling extremely fast.
Right.
But that comet hasn't come back. It's been gone for a long, long time. So potentially, if they knew what the cycle of that comet was, and that it's going to come back, that once again, we're going to have like new big massive sections of it blown off in its tail that we're going to have to pass through right after.
Right. It's the torrid meteor stream.
Right.
And we
pass through it every year.
It's called that because when we pass through it, it appears to come out of Taurus, out of the constellation of Taurus. So it's called the torrid meteor stream. We go through it twice a year. We pass through it one way and then another way.
The bull.
Right. And
the bull of heaven.
In one direction, I can't remember which directions it is, but in one direction we pass through it in such a way where we can watch the torrids at night. That's what they're called, the torrid meteor stream. But the other direction we pass it's during the day. It takes us 12 hours to cross the stream. Okay, it's so many, and the Earth is going like 660,000 miles.
It's 66,600 miles an hour.
Right, so
around the sun.
So if you stretch that out to 12 hours, you can figure out how wide the stream is. Now, the stream is really just the orbit, the orbit of this comet, and it's theorized. This isn't known for sure, but it's theorized that the comet was once a single body of as much as 500 kilometers across. That was pulled into there's this weird kind of game of bucket brigade that happens from the outer planets. The big planets sort of pass this thing around, and then it ends up in an elliptical orbit around that goes all the way into the inner system. But in the process of being passed around by the larger planets, it begins to fragment and break up into, instead of a single rock, a long sort of stream of smaller pieces, and that continues to fragment, until you got a very long stream, and then those start to break up, so then you have sort of isolated clusters of pieces. Right. So at any given time that we pass through the torrid stream, we're in there for 12 hours. You just don't know. Graham Hancock likens it to, twice a year running blindfolded across a 12-lane freeway and just hoping that there's no traffic at the time.
Right.
But one day, you're going to get hit by a truck.
Like one day you're going to cross the road at rush hour.
Right. And there's going to be traffic on the road, but you're running blindfolded and you can't stop, So that would explain some of the regularity if we're encountering something that's in orbit. And the last known torrid object was actually the Tunguska meteorite in 1908. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's wrong. That was the Chelyabinsk meteorite that happened in 2013, the one that came down over Russia and exploded. Now, if that same object that happened, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that, but if you haven't, look it up. Chelyabinsk, Russia meteorite. It basically appears in the morning. It looks like it comes out of the sun, and this is what you start to see some connections to ancient texts, right? Of the gods being mad. The sun was the god, Helios. Mm-hmm. And it looks like the sun shoots this bright, shining thing at the Earth, right? And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it turns into this huge glowing ball, and it was actually 25 miles above the surface when it exploded. And you know, when you watch the videos, the Russians are all looking up there, and the object is long gone, but there's this really strange-looking cloud stream in the sky, and they have no idea that there's this massive shockwave approaching them at hundreds of miles an hour. You know, but it was 25 miles up, so they're looking at it, and they're talking about, and suddenly, boom, and like windows shatter, and you know, but it was just a shockwave of sound. If that object had come in at a slightly steeper angle, or if it had been a little bit bigger or massier than it was, hundreds of thousands of people would have died. Or if it would have come a little bit later and hit, like, I don't know, Hong Kong or London. You know, instead it comes in over Siberia, which is really strange because the last time this happened was 1908, known as the Tunguska meteorite. It came over a extremely remote area of Siberia. Again, it's just weird. So that was the previous Taurid object, and this thing. No, you know, there were a few of the native sort of reindeer herders out there who witnessed it and who have legends about it now. But the effects of it were seen around the world. Like there were stories of people in London being able to read their newspapers at midnight for a couple of days afterwards. I mean, it just really, you know, the sound was heard thousands and thousands of miles away from the area. No crater has ever been found, so it didn't impact. Just like the one that happened more recently, it probably came down and exploded. It was a mid-air explosion. When the first expedition finally got out there, it was a Russian scientist. When he finally got out there, he found hundreds and hundreds of acres. I mean, it may be measured in square miles of massive old-growth taiga forest trees, flattened. Like if you see pictures of them, they look like toothpicks. All these trunks laid down in this direction, and then over here laid down in the other direction. Like there is an epicenter of the explosion. You can see that they're kind of laid down out, you know, but there's no crater. So you know it was an air burst. So that was the, you know, and that one, if that one would have come down and hit and actually impacted, it would have changed the global climate.
Yeah.
You know, and
so yeah, there's the Taurus meteor stream. We go through it every year. We see, you know, people stay up and watch the skies, and there's like all these
meteors. Yeah,
pretty shooting stars.
One day it's going to be a big one.
It's like this is in our faces all the time, like reminding us, hey, things are a lot of things are out there, and they come and impact us, and they may not make it all the way down here before they burn up, but there are plenty.
But there are plenty who have, and. I mean, the Shoemaker-Levy thing that hit Jupiter, that comet broke into 7 pieces, and then 14 pieces, and then it impacted one after the other. And those were when they were impacting Jupiter, they were going 140 miles per hour relative to the atmosphere of Jupiter. I mean,
140 miles an hour.
I'm sorry, 140,000 miles an hour.
I was like, no,
they were if something that fast, I think the most I've seen on the estimates were like it was like 70,000 miles an hour was what they were talking about, the top estimated speeds of a comet coming into Earth. It would be in our atmosphere less than 2 seconds before it hit the surface. There's not time for it to burn up. I mean, if it's a mile across or even a half a mile, if it's coming in like that, you know, if Earth's orbital direction is against the direction of the comet, it'll be on the surface within 2 seconds. If it hits the ocean, it'll hit the bottom, like it could hit the deep Pacific, and it will impact the ocean sediment at the bottom of the Pacific before the ocean behind it has time to close the tunnel that it makes through the water. And in fact, it comes in so fast that the air will still have not closed the tunnel. So there will be a tunnel behind this thing.
A vacuum, basically.
A vacuum tunnel all the way out into space, going through all of the atmosphere and all of the water of the Pacific down to the bottom. And like the water will have just enough time to close over it before the explosion happens. So
it's from the land right underneath.
Yeah, which is another reason why that ocean impacts cause warming, because the water closes over the thing before the explosion happens, so the water absorbs all of the heat. Instead of whereas a land impact, a lot of the heat's reflected right back out into space. It just bounces right back out. If you look at go to the Indian Ocean on Google Earth and look at the coast of Madagascar or the coast of Australia, which is thousands of miles away, you can see, if you're kind of zoomed out, you can see huge wave lines that go hundreds of miles inland from a massive impact that they think happened about 6,000 years ago in the Indian Ocean. I mean, they're just gigantic. You can see the waveforms.
6,000 years ago.
Yep, 6,000 years ago.
Right around the beginning of recorded history before they found Göbekli Tepe.
Right. Well, it's right around the time when the first known badass civilizations just suddenly disappeared, failed. Right? Because that would be 4,000 BC. So you have 6,000 BC, then up to 4,000 BC, and suddenly all that stuff that was being done there just stops.
Right. Yeah. They obviously didn't have what it took to stop it, or maybe they did get off the planet, and that's why.
Right. But you begin to see why the ancients seem to have been obsessed with looking at space.
Yes.
Why they build things like stone.
And why they mapped the stars. They timed it
Yes, because things kept coming out of space and hammering us over and over and over, and they wanted to know if they could predict it. And since it's cyclical, it can be predicted, and that's why you have things like the end of the long count. Now, what's interesting about that is that it doesn't seem to have happened. Right? You see all these predictions of the cataclysm, and there's going to be an apocalypse, and the world's going to end, and every known prophet of every kind of religion or whatever, and even the ancient sages have predicted ends of the world. That didn't happen. It hasn't happened. And when you look at modern science, geology says that glacial and interglacial periods happen. The interglacial periods are roughly 4,000 to 6,000 years long. Ours right now is going on 10, which means that we're way overdue for an ice age, which is a land impact. Basically, the only kind of energetic thing you can get to vastly and catastrophically change the climate like that is an impact from space. It's a cosmically generated thing. It hasn't happened for so long, and this is what I think is going to be the natural cause. So the argument with people over whether we're causing it or it's natural, it doesn't matter. We just need to get off this planet before it happens.
Right.
If we stay here, it's going to get us anyway because the natural thing will get us, right? So,
when I look at the whole situation, it's like why the focus on the human aspect of it with like the near total lack of focus on the natural aspect of climate change is suspicious to me.
And then the proposed solution is for humans to let go of all their technology and stop using any energy and massively basically reverse our advancement back to living in the trees level.
Why? So
which would result in mass famine and a huge die-off, right? So a vastly reduced population, and we would be helpless to stop the natural change. Yes. So there appears to be some kind of conspiracy here, and if you think of like I likened this to a petri dish. You've got a petri dish, and you have a very dangerous kind of microorganism growing in that dish. Some kind of algae or whatever bacteria growing in there. Around the outsides of the petri dish, you have something that kills it. So as it begins to expand and starts to get big, it starts to run into this deadly shit, and that keeps it small. And if it somehow starts to overcome it, you blast it with fire. You can't let it get out of the dish and start killing everybody. So this is what it looks like, a control mechanism that you would use in biology. You don't want to kill it off because you're studying it, or maybe you need it for something, but you keep it within this very tightly confined boundaries, and if it starts to overgrow those boundaries because your control mechanisms are weakened, you bring in the big guns and just blaze it with fire until it dies.
But you'll use as many things as you can, many techniques as you can to keep it from overcoming.
Right, because you want it to keep it alive because you're using it for some purpose or whatever.
So like one method of doing that, for example, would be to funnel large amounts of its resources to some other direction than the thing growing in the petri dish would otherwise use it for.
Right. You want to maybe cause mass deaths with plague. You might want to destroy the global economy so that millions and millions of people starve.
Maybe put that thing in the cooler for a little while.
Yeah, stick it in the cooler or in the furnace.
Or in the furnace.
Yeah.
Just warm it up a little bit.
Right. And if it's highly adaptable, you just keep changing them. You put it in the furnace, and then once it adapts to that, you put it in the cooler.
Right, but with the sentient being,
You can propagandize
change its
it.
focus, right? Like, oh, you know what? You need to focus on this for a long time and not look at this other thing.
Right. And it's fascinating to me that when you look at, like, my dad has a biology book from 1970. Okay? And if you look at that biology book from 1970, they're flipping out about global cooling. I mean, they were flipping out about the coming ice age. They thought that there was an ice age coming, global cooling. And that's closer to right.
They're probably right.
So it switches to global warming at some point, and then eventually that sort of homogenizes to climate change. But global warming is wrong, and then the idea that warming is bad is wrong, because like all of the geological history shows us that the warm periods were the good ones.
Right.
It was a time of plenty. Sometimes in the warm periods, you know, in times of within human history, we would have multiple crop yields per year because it was warm. The medieval warm period was like, it was amazing. That was when all the Gothic cathedrals were built, you know, and then the little ice age comes and all the building stops and millions of people in Europe die because of famine and then plague, and, you know, and there are cathedrals still there with piles of stone.
Wait, when was the little ice age?
It was, I think it ended at the very beginning of the Renaissance, so up to 14 something. Yeah, and the medieval warm period was.
I wonder if that was caused by an impact.
It could have been. You know, it's hard to tell.
But this makes me think of.
There are other drivers. The sun. Yeah.
In the Bible, there's a couple of points like with the Adam and Eve story of the Bible in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve partaking of the fruit of the knowledge
of good and evil.
What I call just the fruit of knowledge, but the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. God says, like, now that they have eaten of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, if they then eat the fruit,
also partake of the fruit.
If they also partake of the fruit of life,
the tree of life,
fruit of the tree of life, then they will become like us.
Yep.
So we must kick them out of the garden and place the flaming sword in front of the tree of life to prevent them from getting it.
Bam!
Now,
banned.
Right. So then you move ahead after the flood. Okay, the story of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
Once again, God comes down, observes. He has to fly down here because he needs to see what we're doing with eyes.
Yeah, that's right.
And he says to unknown compatriots, like, look at what they're doing. They're all, because they are all of one language. Nothing that they set about to do will they not be able to achieve.
Yeah, and if they achieve these things, nothing shall be withheld from them.
Right, and they will become like us.
Yeah.
So we must go down and confuse their language so that they will be scattered throughout the planet.
Right.
So they do that. So there looks to be this sort of conspiracy of keeping us
Here.
And like
Keeping us in the petri dish.
You take this story literally in the Tower of Babel. What were they doing? They quote unquote were building a tower to the heavens because they were saying, like, we do not want to be scattered throughout the earth.
Right. That's what makes it so sad. It says it's like, come, let us make bricks, let us bake them in the sun, let us build a tower whose top shall reach the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves so that we shall not be scattered across the face of the earth. And then God comes down and he's like, let's scatter them across the face of the earth.
Right. So it looks like the same type of conspiracy going on here. Like, like we have discovered space flight, and now we have these moon hoaxers that are like, no, we never actually went there, and you can't even do this. And
Right.
it's impossible.
Yeah.
And
in the second episode, we talked about the moon hoaxers, and there's this weird thing about in the moon hoax conspiracy, there's actually a sort of tendency to make these people believe that we actually can't go to space at all.
Right. And then, not to mention all of the medical stuff where it's like, oh yeah, humans can't even, you can't really stay up there because it's going to mess up your body in all these ways and you'll die because blah blah blah. And so you know, it's like, so wait a minute, I'm reading a story that's telling me that I can't go to space and live there. No, because you have to have the Earth's gravity in order to make your body work right, and otherrise you'll just die.
And that you know, but the thing is that there's ways to mitigate that. Like, if it's true that your bones will separate and your, you know, you'll lose your muscles will atrophy. Well, yeah, but we can stop that.
Right. We can develop technology that will keep us alive.
Right. Like, centrifuges work great. You have a big enough space station, you spin it like a wheel. Yeah, you can simulate gravity like that. But the point is that This connects back to all this stuff we've been talking about in the sense that there seems to be a long game, in other words, long-term thinking, something that has been doing this for thousands of years, right? That is aimed at keeping us here and keeping us from becoming like that.
Obtaining the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Which
would
where
be
are the heavens?
Space.
Space!
Right. So that's really the conclusion we come to. Not really a conclusion. It is when
It's
you're
food for thought.
Yes, when you're down in this rabbit hole, you know, that's the last door you find. It's like, wow, humans must stay on Earth because otherwise they'll be God. I don't even know if I want to open that door.
That's why we're brothers of the serpent, because snakes come from the sky.
Fucking crocodile kings.
Serpent in the sky.
That's right. Serpent in the sky is many things. It is the comet of destruction. It is the bringer of knowledge. It's the yellow dragon, Huandi, that teaches the monkey the 72 forms of change, and after which he will be the seeker, the knower of secrets. I've learned one form so far. This one. Pretty good at it, though.
Hey, we went a little long on this segment, but it was well worth it. 4 minutes. 4 minutes you must have suffered through.
Four. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
That
We
concludes.
will see you next week, probably. Maybe farther than that. No, maybe earlier than that.
We won't
might
see
be
them
here tomorrow.
because
Be
we're snake bros casting pods
well,
full of snakes. Sorry.
plus more.